Have you ever considered that the biggest drain on your food budget may not be what you buy, but actually what you waste? Welcome back to Rooted and Restless. I'm your host, Marianne Smith Edge. If there's one thing on everybody's mind today, it's about food and the price of food. So today, my guest is a real champion at identifying perhaps some things that we're doing in our own kitchens that's contributing to that food cost. I'm pleased to have colleague and friend, registered dietitian RosanneRust. Rosanne is owner of Rust Nutrition Communications and Chew the Facts. She's a prolific author, content creator, speaker, and a true science-based fact finder. So Rosanne, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, putting down that pen or computer pad to actually give us some insight on one of the topics that you really talk quite a bit about and have written about. That would be food waste. So thank you so much. Let's talk about, I just happen to have one of your cookbooks here, that the zero waste cooking. So perhaps a good way to start is, how did you decide to write a book like this? And what does that mindset really look like?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to speak with you today. And, this book came out in 2022, and the more I think about it, the more I realize that zero waste cooking was really at the root of the way I was raised and what I watched. My mother was the cook in the house, and she made use of everything. And my father's father was a butcher, and I always heard these stories of, nose to tail and then no waste. No waste. So I think deep inside, this no waste was just living in me. And as a dietitian, we are aware of the problem of food waste. So, that's kind of how I gravitated toward the idea and thought, I can do the research, and I have a lot of kind of lived experience of tips and tricks for wasting less and doing more with the food that you have access to.
Well, I can appreciate that. I grew up on a dairy farm, and believe me, nothing went unconsumed. And so, I've always loved leftovers. But I think the nice thing about when we talk about zero waste cooking, it's more than just, quote, eating leftovers. So one of the things that you really talk about is kind of that initial checklist, getting into the zero waste mindset. So maybe that's a good place to start before we get into some practical applications, is what does that look like?
Yeah. And it is absolutely sort of a thought process. And that's sort of how I started the book is, let's start thinking about what you throw away on a regular basis, and then create a plan that can help you prevent doing that in the future. And we don't have to be perfect. The idea of zero waste is really kind of unattainable, but I guess it's good on SEO. So
Right.
publishers said,
Sounds good.
but low waste, less waste is what everyone, I think, can achieve. And the top three tips, the tier is buy less or shop right, store it properly, and then use it. It's as simple sometimes as eating that food that's just sitting there uneaten. But the buying properly, deciding what you really need, what you're going to use. I like to recommend that as you shop, you're more intentional, and sometimes we're all subject to impulse buys. They have beautiful displays in the grocery store to entice us, and we all get sucked in. But when you put it in the cart, what am I going to do with that? Have a purpose, have a plan for everything that you put in your grocery cart, whether it's that you're going to cook it that week or that day or in the next few days, or you're going to freeze it, how you're going to store it. Can it keep? Is it perishable? When am I going to eat that? Did I buy it because it looked beautiful? or do I really have a plan to cook that vegetable? Or and I think as dietitians, we're always talking about eating more fruits and vegetables, and people get that message, and sometimes they're buying it. And I've heard this from clients and consumers. I feel good buying all of these fruits and vegetables that I'm supposed to be eating, but then I don't actually prepare them or create the plan to make that eating part happen. And then a lot of that goes to waste if it's perishable.
And I'm guilty of that as well sometimes, and I think buying, especially, well, it depends on the area of fresh fruits or vegetables at farmers markets. I mean, farmers markets are in full swing everywhere. And I think giving, we could talk about some practical ways of actually using what we buy and not, because frankly, things are a little higher. Tomatoes are a perfect example, at least in our area. So give us some thought is that we don't get carried away buying, $6-7 of tomatoes, and then suddenly they look beautiful on the counter, but there you have it. What's next?
Yeah, and you have to kind of evaluate your household. I know, as you know, I had 3 children. So when we were a family of 5, we were feeding 5 people and 3 of them were growing. That's a lot more food than when it settles down to 3 people. And then all of a sudden it's 2 people. And, after 30 years of that kind of routine, it took me probably 3 years to get to the point where I'm buying my groceries appropriately for a household of 2. So it's what are you going to do with that? And cooked vegetables, if you're talking about the farmer's market and you see these beautiful tomatoes, how do you eat tomatoes? Do you eat them on your salad and in a sandwich and that's it? Or are you planning to cook them and incorporate them into dishes? Because cooked vegetables will last longer in the refrigerator than fresh and unprepared. So it comes down to that plan. And, sometimes even though they look beautiful, maybe keeping a canned tomato in the pantry is a better option for your lifestyle than having only fresh.
Now that I've bought the tomatoes, and if they're
I sense that you have some tomatoes in your kitchen.
I do. And they're I've sliced them. I do a caprese salad. Love all of that. But I have some ways that this is not going to go to waste. But what's some creative ways that, and I know it's mentioned in your book as well, those cherry tomatoes that might start getting too ripe, or even, the other tomatoes that were like, oh, are these too ripe? But I don't want them to go to waste. What's some great simple tips to?
A couple ideas. Number one, we like food, especially fruits and vegetables, that look perfect and beautiful. So when those little cherry tomatoes or grape tomatoes are getting a little shriveled, there's a few shriveled ones in there, we think, right, oh, I can't serve that. Or you might even think you can't eat it, but it's still perfectly fine to eat. So one idea is to roast them or dehydrate them. You can do like a sun-dried tomato in your regular little oven or toaster oven. You don't even need a dehydrate setting. You can just do low heat, let it hang out in there for the day while you're doing other things. And then a little olive oil, a little bit of salt, and you have a nice concentrated tomato that you can save then, that will last longer. I just made a caponata vegetable relish salad dish. It's an Italian dish with, really, you can put anything in it: tomatoes, eggplant. If you have mushrooms, you can throw those in, any kind of bell pepper, and you cook it all together. You can use a little bit of tomato sauce if you have a little bit left in a jar, and just cook it. A little balsamic vinegar, and then something salty like capers or chopped olives if you have those. And again, you can take out or put in almost anything and sort of make, it's like a ratatouille, any kind of mixed cooked vegetable dish, and then put it in the fridge. And that'll last for another week. Whereas if those things are just sitting on your counter or in your refrigerator bins, they may start to shrivel up and spoil.
And it's a great way. And I've found a lot of times it works pretty well just to freeze some of those too after you kind of cook them up, because, you know, in the middle of winter, they can always be added to another tomato or pasta sauce or whatever.
Or a chili, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So the key here is don't let a tomato go to waste. That's it. That's important. I agree with you. It's like prepare, roast. I know over the weekend, I was just mentioning to you, I actually got some questions. I was at a totally non-food meeting, but someone's like, so what do I do with these strawberries that I buy and to make sure they don't go to waste? And I think berries in certain part of the countries are readily available, and we get excited about buying them, but at the same time we forget that they don't have a long shelf life. Yeah.
They don't. A couple of things with berries. Again, I mentioned sort of those three tiers. Buy what you need, store it right, and then use it. So the storage part is important. And, different fruits and vegetables do better in different parts of the refrigerator. We can talk about that in a minute. But berries are very delicate. They're very sensitive to moisture. So you want to keep them as dry as possible. So they want a low humidity drawer in your refrigerator. And therefore, you don't want to wash them when you get home and put them away, because that water is just going to cause them to rot more quickly. And you have to eat them. Blueberries last a little longer because they have a tougher skin, a more protective skin. But strawberries and raspberries, 3-4 days, they're going to start to mold or get mushy. So to either prevent that, you either have to eat them, use them, enjoy them as a snack in your yogurt, on your cereal, as a dessert. But if you aren't going to eat them all, you can freeze them. You can also make jam, even a simple, cook them in a pot with a little bit of sugar, and that can be a topping, that can be a jam. It doesn't have to be a, true jarred jelly process. And then you can freeze that as well, and that will last. Yesterday, I chopped some strawberries, and I like to make a strawberry syrup also out of the stems. If I'm not going to do that, I'll try to carefully cut the stem so I'm not wasting, a fourth of the strawberry itself. But if you just chop the top off and you have that little bit of strawberry left, you wash all of your stems fully, this whole strawberry, put them in a jar with some sugar, and that's it. And the next day, the sugar draws all the water out of that strawberry, and you've got like a strawberry syrup that you can put in your lemonade or make a cocktail with, or drizzle over some yogurt or ice cream.
That's a great idea. I haven't done that. I haven't done that before.
I should have brought my prop over there. That's last night.
That's great. Well, we'll make sure and make a reference to that in the show notes, so people can do that.
I'll send you a picture.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's. I think when we talk about it's been a push on. It's always been as dietitians to eat more fruits and vegetables, but there's kind of this overall push of eating more fresh fruits and vegetables. But my question to you, because when you really look at, you've delved into the sustainability aspect as well, but I'm curious how you think that perhaps this push from a consumer standpoint of perfect produce, has contributed to a little bit more of, or do you think it's contributed a little bit more to kind of the whole concept of really sustainable eating?
I do think it has. As I mentioned, we are conditioned to want perfect looking produce because that's what we see.
Right.
You mentioned you grew up on a farm, and I grew up with a backyard filled with orchard of peaches, apples, pears, grapes, cherries, trees. So none of our fruit was didn't look anything like what it looks like. There were spots on all the apples. And, I watched my parents just cut out the spot. The whole rest of the thing is fine. So I encourage folks to, sometimes farmers markets may not have the most perfect, to not always look for that perfect, and to go for those imperfect items and then simply trim around. There's not a safety issue there at all. But I don't know if that quite answers your question, but I think that, the spots and the blemishes even after you get home, if something ends up being bruised and you think, well, this whole entire tomato or this whole entire apple isn't any good anymore, and pitch the whole thing, you can cut that part off and just waste that part and continue to eat or prepare the rest of that fruit or vegetable.
And I think that mindset has also contribute to waste further down the food supply chain. And from your experience, because and you've been out on a lot of farms too, do farmers ever talk about the fact that they grow more than sometimes they can actually provide to the supplier, because there's very specific specifications, and so if there's some blemishes, sometimes they won't take it.
Yeah. And I mean, I'd like to see some kind of legislation around that. When we were in Denver for FNCE, our food and nutrition conference a few years ago, I had the opportunity to go to a facility, We Don't Waste, and they are a nonprofit that takes the produce, because sometimes the farmer might be able to ship it, but the grocery store won't take it because it's too much, or there's some, quote, bad apples in there, and that would be dumped. This is terrible. This nonprofit in Denver takes what the grocery store doesn't take, and we were at their facility and we're able to, make some boxes. I mean, this produce, some of it's perfect. It's perfectly good, and they create a free farmers market for anyone, or for those with less access, and they give to the food banks. So it's a really nice rescue program. And if we could have something like that everywhere, I told them they should, franchise it or something. This is a great model that would be helpful all over the country. But we grow more than we use, unfortunately, and I don't know how we solve that problem of consumers expecting that perfect looking squash or apple or whatever it is.
Well, I think you and I both have grew up with that mindset. So I think kind of developing that, things are still fine. Just cut the little blemish out and use it.
Right. And I encourage, all of the dietitians I've spoken to, either formally or informally, to, incorporate these little messages, no matter who their audience is or what they're doing. That it's to just, the more we hear it and the more we see, oh, here's an apple with a spot, or here's a squash with a spot, and we're going to just shave it off and use the rest. The more, maybe we'll get to people.
Now, let's hear from Mindy Herman, registered dietitian, food and nutrition writer, and a guru on all the latest food trends.
Hi, Marianne and Rosanne. Let's take a closer look at food waste. According to statistics from the organization ReFed, 29% of all food goes unsold or uneaten, and 94 billion pounds of food go to waste each year. Well over half of food waste comes from the food industry. ReFed notes that 33% of retail food waste is from fruits and vegetables, 14% from fresh meat and seafood, and 11% from dairy and eggs. Some waste is due to spoilage and some because of confusion about freshness date labels. Food rescue organizations like Feeding America send surplus food from farms, stores, and restaurants to food banks for distribution. On a smaller local level, the app Too Good To Go enables consumers to pick up surplus prepared foods at the end of the business day from restaurants, bakeries, and food shops. You don't know exactly what you'll be getting, and that's part of the fun.
Now, let's return to our conversation. Well, kind of to contribute on some of your ideas and your cookbook writing, obviously I mentioned you're a prolific author, and I'm always impressed. It's like it's like I obviously haven't figured out how to just turn things out as quickly. So you've got, I think, not one but two different type of cookbooks coming out, either by yourself or with other individuals. So give us some insight, and how does some of your principles on not wasting food kind of come into these as well?
Well, I have the books. So this one is out. It's the GLP-1 Kitchen, written with Liz Weiss and Sunoy Escobar. Sunoy is a weight loss dietitian, works with patients on GLP-1s, and Liz Weiss is a culinary dietitian. So she created all the recipes, and I edited this book for them. And, in this case, our goal was to help people who have no appetite that are beginning these medications, and especially the ones who maybe don't have access or didn't get any referral to a dietitian and kind of are just starting these medications, to give them some very basics in nutrition and some ideas for packing some nutrition in small bites. So we have smoothie and smoothie bowl recipes. Smoothies are a great way to help reduce food waste, because you can use that little blemished, shriveled blueberry and blend it up, and it still has the nutrition and nobody notices. And then DASH diet for dummies. The For Dummies brand is a machine, so that's how these come out so quickly, although we lose our mind for 6 months while we're writing them. That was co-written with Cindy Kleckner, also a culinary dietitian, and Sarah Simon, Dr. Sarah Simon. She's a cardiologist and physician. And this is the second edition. The third edition will be red, and it comes out this August. We just finished the third edition. So I incorporate food waste messages into that book as well. And as you or your audience may or may not know, that DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. So it is a low sodium diet, not a no sodium diet, but a low sodium diet, in addition to encouraging lots of fruits and vegetables, and 2 to 3 servings of dairy a day, and healthy fats and nuts and seeds and so forth. But people consider canned vegetables to be high in sodium. Many are, but you can choose low sodium. And canned beans, I'm a big bean fan, because beans are loaded with fiber and good nutrition. They're environmentally friendly from that aspect. They don't, their legumes are nitrogen fixing, so we could go into those nerdy weeds, but we won't. But canned beans are convenient. They're inexpensive. Most people have access to them. You can rinse them, and that takes away a lot of the sodium, and incorporate those into meals. So I do kind of, like I said, I always have that low waste, use what you have kind of tips in all of my books, one way or the other, without necessarily calling out food waste.
But just being practical, which I think is great. And
from your dollar and making your food budget stretch.
And I think the DASH diet, and I'm glad you give it, because everybody that is listening is not a dietitian per se, but the DASH diet is not just for someone that's controlling hypertension. I think, and just give us, you mentioned it. It really is a well balanced, and just a little insight, because I think it's been ranked as one of the top. When we look at diets of the year, and I even hate to use diet. I think it's more of a eating style, if anything. But
right.
But maybe just a little more insight of why it's such a good guideline.
Yeah, more of a dietary plan. Well, DASH, number one, it's evidence-based. It's based on clinical research that initially showed evidence that this dietary pattern helped reduce blood pressure for people with high blood pressure. But many, many other research studies have supported all of the other dietary factors that are part of the DASH plan: low in saturated fat, high in fiber, high in potassium and other important minerals, So it really is sort of a dietary plan that research has shown helps reduce all disease risk, not just for supportive heart disease. And I have a family history of heart disease, so that was where my passion for learning more about it and writing the first book came from.
It's a great guideline, and I think for some of us, we're really glad it is evidence based, as you mentioned. So that's a good thing. Well, I mentioned to you earlier when we were talking prior to this that the whole concept around the podcast is always digging deeper into the stories behind food, and everyone has a story about food or what's really important. So, thinking about your background, what's that story about around a particular food or food occasion that really sticks with you?
We had many food occasions in my household. I come from an Italian heritage. My grandparents were Italian. So, the foods that really, are still my top tier that are, and I think even more so now because they're demonized: bread and pasta.
Oh my.
My mother made homemade bread and homemade pasta. I have visions of being in the kitchen. My grandfather, my mother's father, made a dowel, a rod with a little stand just to hang the fettuccine on.
Oh,
that,
wow.
she made and cut by hand with a machine eventually. And so I saw it happen. I saw how it all came together. I remember going into my foods class in college. I don't know, foods 1, foods 2. We made bread, and these other kids didn't know what they were doing. And I realized, oh, everyone doesn't know how to knead bread already. We're getting taught how to do this, but it's a feel. I made dough over the weekend, and it looks one way. And then once you knead it, it gets smooth and elastic. And, it's the food science of it, which I wasn't realizing I was learning then. And then you eat it. And, fresh bread, fresh pasta that's homemade is just, incredible. And now everyone's worried about carbs. We want fiber, but we're avoiding grain foods. A lot of this doesn't make sense at all. So bread and pasta, that's it, Marianne.
Well,
I still enjoy it. I'm never going to avoid it. There's no reason to.
And I think you bring up or nor should we, unless, granted, there are definitely situations that one needs to. But I think you bring up a really good point, is that sometimes we say we want to go back to eat the way our grandparents ate, and it's like, guess what? They actually ate a balanced diet, and really based on heritage a lot of times too.
And it really was. It was lots of fruits and vegetables and grains and a little bit of meat, for the most part, because you couldn't afford it or it wasn't available. Meat was only available certain times a year or whatever.
So the great thing is when you're kneading that bread, you actually are also reliving some of the memories, which is a great way to connect.
Every time I knead bread, almost brings tears to my eyes.
Which is a wonderful story. So thinking of stories and food, we are coming up on the big 4th of July weekend, and just in general, we're in the middle of summer, and so thinking about ideas. So I think someone
picnic season.
Yeah, picnic season. So from your wealth of information, what's some great ideas that we can celebrate, and yet it be healthier, and think about reducing that food waste as well.
Yeah. Well, I love a picnic. I love an outdoor party, a barbecue. Food prices they're shocking every time I go to the grocery store myself. So a couple ideas. I tagged a couple recipes in my zero waste cooking book. But in general, I think that this, when food prices are so high, it's a good idea to simplify your menu and maybe have more of a fewer things as opposed to having a bunch of different options. Um, Chicken is a little bit more affordable than beef. So grilling chicken, a little barbecue, and another great way to stretch your ground beef, you could also use ground turkey or ground chicken, but if you use ground beef, is mushrooms. I like to do a 50-50 burger and chop mushrooms. I like to saute them first a little bit before I add them to the beef. And then, 1 pound of beef, instead of making 4 burgers, you can make 6 or 8 by combining it with the chopped mushrooms. And the mushrooms make it moist and delicious. You don't even have to tell anyone if they don't like mushrooms. They won't even know. It all blends in both visually and it tastes delicious. And then I mentioned those beans, very high in nutrients and delicious. I've got a kicked up cannellini beans and rice. I have another beans and rice recipe is a great picnic. You can eat it hot or cold. A slow cooked pulled pork is also a nice kind of feed a crowd. And I don't know, my parents taught me to shop what's on sale. So look for what is on sale in the meat department because meat is pretty high right now. And sometimes buying in bulk saves you money, sometimes it doesn't. So you kind of have to do a little math. But usually, from the meat market standpoint, buying in bulk will save you some money. So if you're only going to use half, freeze the other half as soon as you get home. Put it in a zipper tight bag, airtight, mark it, date it, put it in the freezer, and you'll have that for later. So let's see, a bean dish, and then I would do some simple fruit. Watermelon, still pretty reasonable. Instead of having a fruit salad that's complicated and it's going to cost a little more, when it's a hot day, a sliced piece of watermelon is fantastic. Kids like it. It's family friendly, and it's pretty low waste and easy to do.
And it's red, which is great.
And, it's a good time to, maybe learn how to bake something yourself, something simple, have a go-to baked recipe, or a very simple one is a cobbler. I have a fruit cobbler recipe in the Zero Waste Cooking Book, and that's very easy. You can use any kind of fruit. It doesn't take there's no rolling out anything. There's very little skill involved, and it's nutritious and delicious. Also a good way to use bruised peaches up. You can just trim off that brown spot and use the rest of the peach in the cobbler, and then you have a delicious dessert as well.
Well, it all sounds wonderful, and really, if you think about it, what you just described is it's not really difficult. But it's just kind of given a little different mindset of thinking about how you can really make a truly delicious holiday or any type of picnic, and and also preserve food and reduce waste and cost, which is perfect in your food budget.
If anything's left over, you're going to wrap it up appropriately and put it in the fridge. Don't let it sit out all day. People have 2 hours to eat, and then you're putting the food in the fridge.
Right. Yes. Because we've done a community picnic, and I give my husband credit. A couple of weeks ago, we were having a neighborhood, and he made his coleslaw, which he's known for, but he put it in an ice bath. Now, so obviously our years of marriage, he's learned something,
Keep the cold food cold and the hot food hot.
Rosanne, thank you so much for your insight. I would say if we were going to leave our audience with just 1 or 2 quick tips in looking at overall controlling that food costs by controlling food waste, what's the number one takeaway?
The number one takeaway is shop smart, store it right, and use it all.
And that's perfect. And using it all means also, as you said, look at what's in your refrigerator.
Cook it, eat it, freeze it. Yes.
and use it and not lose it, so to speak. So
exactly.
Well, thank you, Rosanne, for your time today. And just a note is that the cookbooks that Rosanne has mentioned definitely links will be in the show notes. So they're just valuable guides as well to really further your not only how to control waste, but also move us into healthful eating. So here's to good health and to a wonderful 4th and summer, Rosanne. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Rooted and Restless. It's all about digging deeper into the behind the scenes about food, agriculture, and nutrition. Because after all, every food has a story, and sometimes it's not as simple as it seems. Subscribe to Rooted and Restless wherever you listen to podcasts or find us on YouTube.